Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voice Like a Lion podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pemberton, and today we have one of the OGs in the e-commerce podcast space. I stole this straight from her LinkedIn, so I do not take credit for this, but one of the OG e-commerce master plan. This is Chloe Thomas. Chloe, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited to learn from you, but again, thank you for being here.
A pleasure to be here, Stephen. Thank you for the invite. Looking forward
Absolutely.
to chatting.
So, OG e-commerce podcast, a long time, over a decade. So, with over a decade's worth of experience, what made you get into the podcasting space, especially for e-com? It seems like you niched down pretty early.
Well, I was already niched down. That's the thing. I'd already written a couple of books about e-commerce. And
Okay.
I was almost 10 years into my e-commerce career by that point. So
Well,
I was pretty much in the niche. So it was the obvious place to put the podcast. How I ended up doing it was I was running a marketing agency at the time, and I was struggling to find ways to generate new sales and new clients, because I believe this is fairly similar in the US to how it is in the UK, but e-commerce people don't like leaving their desks. They didn't like leaving their desks before the pandemic. They don't like leaving their desks post the pandemic, and they were not going anywhere during the pandemic. Because networking is not particularly useful to them.
right.
It should be. We could argue that for hours, but they don't really see the value in it. So to casually meet them is pretty difficult. But a lot of them are still doing pick and pack, or they're sat at their desk, or they're doing these things. So when a friend of mine was doing we're doing a speaker tour on behalf of the UK government around kind of like the outlying bits of the UK. And his session was on social media, and he kept going on about podcasting. This was in 2014. And I was like, Matt, what's this podcasting thing? What are you on about? And he told me to listen to Entrepreneur on Fire by John Lee Dumas, which I got a little bit obsessed by, and very obsessed by their, they certainly used to do like a monthly income statement thing. I got very obsessed with that and decided this was the route for me, because I was also trying to find a way out of the agency at the same time. So that's kind of how it all came together. It took about 6 months to be ready to launch, and then it's been every week since June 2015. So 2015? Since June 2015, every week we put out at least one episode, which is kind of insane, really. But it's a lot of fun.
That's incredible. So you were talking about the agency that you had. What kind of agency was that? Because over 2 decades in the e-commerce space is quite a long time. I have a client that he's been in the e-commerce space similarly. He started out in eBay. eBay was a big thing for him. He's done pretty well, transitioned into being more of a speaker, podcaster himself. And so it seems almost like the natural transition. But so with the marketing agency, what were you doing there?
We went through about 5 different business models during the course of the 10 years when I ran it. We started out as an outsourced e-commerce team for mail order businesses, which is what I was doing for the year prior to starting it. That never really took off, but at that time we were doing everything from setting up products on the website and project managing website builds through to running Google ads and affiliate campaigns and SEO. We did everything basically. And then by the time I left it, we had become basically a Google ads agency, dabbling in a little bit of Facebook ads.
Wow. So that's a pretty big, you trimmed it up and brought it down to just a handful of, this is something that me and my business partner have looked at, that's what we found. Because basically when he found me was over 2 years ago. And I was similar. It was like, hey, I'll help you with your website. I'll help you with Facebook marketing, with Google ads. I'll help you, find a supplier. I'll help you figure out a product. I will help you with everything. And then I found out, it's like, wait, I can actually charge better prices. My customers get better results, and I can give them more one-to-one attention, more white glove attention if I just reduce the things I can do. And it's like, what is the things I actually enjoy doing? I actually enjoy doing this. I actually enjoy being able to consult with these brands. I actually enjoy being able to help them with their paid marketing. I actually enjoy being able to help them with customer service. It's like, this is my areas of expertise. Why not just stick there? And it's also just interesting. I would love to get your take on this, but I've seen 2 things. I've seen brands where they just kind of shotgun it, right? They just have a zillion different products, hoping that somebody buys something, and then they don't really specify why anyone should buy anything. And then I see this quite a bit in the agency space. Is it'll be there's a good friend of mine, but he has an agency similar to this where it's like I'll help you with your with your legal side, your trademarks. I'll help you with paid marketing, social media marketing. I'll help you with everything, search. I'll help you literally with everything, websites, influencers. And I just think there's so many of those things, and there's things inside of that he's excellent at. And in my opinion, if you just focus on what you're excellent at, you have the most testimonials around. It sets you apart from everyone else who's trying to market everything.
Oh yeah, totally agree. And there you can be a marketing strategist. You can do the fractional CMO thing and do everything because you need to have a level of knowledge about everything.
Yep.
What you can't do is be brilliant at all those different things because they're so different skill sets. And even what you needed, the skill set you needed for Google ads and Facebook ads 10 years ago is completely different to what you need now due to the huge shift, from targeting skills to creative skills. So yeah, I think I get suspicious of anyone who says they do everything
Mm.
these days because I don't think you're going to be, if you're being a CMO and you're coming in and giving advice and high level advice, or you're working with startups who are being, very early stage, then yeah, fair enough, be able to dip your toe in everything. But if you want to sell services, be great at something because then people know you as that, and they'll come to you for that and they'll come to you for that again and again and again because people love to pigeonhole you. So if they
Mm-hmm.
know you're Chloe and you run the Google Ads agency, life's an awful lot easier if you're Chloe and you do something to do with e-commerce marketing, but we're not sure if it's consulting
Yep.
or if it's done for you or if it overlaps. I don't really understand. The
Yep.
more you can be that focused, the easier life is in business. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's such a fascinating conversation. And when you're going through the podcast, you're talking to all these different people, brands, other agency owners, pretty much a lot of different experts, different people in the industry in general. Have you seen that to be the case with some of the people that you've seen to be the best or kind of leading the charge where they're really, really good at one thing, maybe two at the max?
I mean, most of our interviews on e-commerce master plan are brands, and I would say most brands get really good at one or two marketing methods. That tends to be the thing that drives their sales. And sometimes that is because those of us who have done this for many years and go, well, obviously you should be selling on that. That's always going to work for you. But sometimes it's also because that's what the founder likes doing. Like I was interviewing someone earlier today who been running a business for 5 years. They're doing really well in the home and interiors space. And she said, we've never spent any money on marketing in 5 years. They
Oh,
focused on PR and organic Instagram. I think I didn't ask her this, but I reckon partly because that's what the founder likes doing. That's what the founder feels confident doing. And they've got a product which works for that, but they've never done an ad.
oh.
I assume they've got email and other things going on as well. So yeah, I think each of the marketing channels are so nuanced now that
Mm-hmm.
you really need to focus on them to make them work for you. You
Yep.
can't be a do a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the other. You've really got to make them work. Um, and above all, you've really got to make sure you've got the messaging that your customers want to hear, because that's what we're increasingly seeing across the whole marketing mix at the moment. Is if your message doesn't resonate with the customers, by which I mean the words, the offer, the product,
Right.
the graphics, the format, the hook, the whole thing. If you don't get the message right, then you're not going to survive with the algorithms or with the customers either.
Yeah, that's something I've seen with the brands who do really well and the brands that don't do so well. Is that this is what I just call the through line. Basically, everything you just explained is from the first time someone interacts with your brand to the time that they check out, and then everything that happens after that. Is there congruency? Like, are you the same? It basically, is the if similar to even the conversation we were having outside of the podcast
Mm-hmm.
is similar to how we're having this conversation. I'm pretty much the same person I'll be after this. It's the through line, right? But similarly, as if your ad is basically selling cookies, you go to the website and then all of a sudden you're selling life insurance. It's like, wait, you you promised me free cookies. Now I'm on here and you're trying to sell me life insurance. Like, this is weird. And then let's say I even buy the life insurance. Now over here trying to sell me a car. It's like, wait, That these are all different. And I just think that when you get uncongruent, when you have those incongruencies, I don't know if incongruent is a word, made it up probably, but
Run with it. It works. It really
hey,
works.
worked. But incongruencies that are happening in this through line, I've seen that kill brands, and I've seen brands that will spend tens of thousands of dollars in paid marketing, but not fix these aspects of their business, and they just grow themselves into the ground because they can't get their lifetime values is terrible, and they're always chasing new customers every single month. And of course, because you understand this, but from running a marketing agency, if you're always doing that through paid marketing, and especially if you are only honed in one channel, your cost to acquire customers going up. Maybe you're not good at your creatives. Your creatives are getting stale. Now you've just found yourself in this really hard spot where it's like, now what do I do? So I love that though that you were saying. It's like, what is a founder good at? What do they enjoy doing? This is what I've found from mainly brands between 500,000 up to 1 million is that the way you get there is usually through one acquisitions channel. You usually have you usually have a series of things that you sell, but it's probably not 100 SKUs that you got you to 1 million. But what's interesting is it's usually founder led. The founders have some kind of skill that they're really good at. Usually it's marketing, or they're really good at hiring teams that are good at the marketing side. And once they get there, then that's usually where I start seeing the breakdown though. It's like at 1 million up to 3 million is they don't necessarily know how to scale, because what got them to 1 million won't get them to five, and it definitely won't get them to 10. Has that been similar for the brands that you talked to, or am I just way off?
No, no, it's common across all businesses, not just e-commerce. You will see, if you see the really successful business people, they know, or they work out fairly quickly whether they're someone who's great at taking you from 0 to 5 or 0 to 1, whatever the upper number is, and then from the middle growth stage, and then the big growth stage. And if you look at people's careers, you'll see they've always worked with the big blue chip because they're good in the big blue chip, or
Yeah,
they've always worked with the the sneaky little, I want to dip my toe into, go back to what we were saying earlier, I want to dip my toe into everything and get involved in everything, I want to do lots of testy stuff. And you will see that like business owners do well at that process as well. Tomorrow I'm interviewing someone who's a specialist in buying businesses that aren't doing very many sales and quickly in putting in place the systems to grow them really fast to then sell them on again. It's like there's definitely skill sets for each of those stages, which doesn't mean you can't take a business from 0 to 100 million yourself. But if you're going to try and do it yourself, you've got to understand that the people who are on the journey with you are going to change as you go through that, or they're going to need different training and skill sets and different mindsets as you go through those different stages.
I
Because yeah,
agree.
you can't do the same thing and expect the growth to just miraculously happen forever.
Yeah, I mean, some of the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation, of our time, like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, some of these people, they don't have a huge stake in the company anymore. I mean, you have to give up certain pieces of it to be able to grow. Because I mean, unfortunately, I don't know. Elon's kind of an outlier where this dude is still the CEO of like six multi-billion-dollar businesses. But most people, it's usually one thing that gets really big, and then they just move out of the way. That's one of the things I've noticed with brands around 1 million is that if they want to grow quickly, the founder slash CEO, they have to bring in someone who's a little bit more business minded than them, because that person is usually really good at one thing. Like there's a client that we have that for him is he is incredible, probably world class at networking, which is fascinating for e-commerce because most e-commerce, I've had two different stores, both of them going over 7 figures. You could not find me anywhere. I was on no social media. It's like there was no way you were running into me. I never left the house. I was always at my desk, similar to what you were saying before 2020. So there was no way you're going to find me after 2020 with all these new fun digital tools that we have. But for him, is it's like, dude, you want to raise capital, but you want to get stuck in running Facebook ads. It's like you're great at networking. This he randomly walks into a party and becomes best friends with Sergey Brin. Sergey Brin flies him around the world. It's like no one just does that. And so for me, is it's focus on your skill sets. Focus what you're really good at. Bring somebody else in, just depending on what that looks like for him and for his business, like bring someone else in so that way they can focus on the business while they focus in the business, you focus on the business. And what does that look like for him is fundraising, because he wants to go the venture route and to get a lot of money in and then scale it quickly. It's like, if that's the way you want to go, then the way to do that is you have to release control of some of these different areas of your business.
There's a fascinating guy in the UK, and this is stuck with me for, God, probably more than a decade now, who I saw do a fireside chat at an event. And his name's Johnny Bowden, and he runs a clothing business called Bowden, which is huge in the UK. Big mail order business now with physical stores, multi million pound turnover. which he started and has remained in a senior position for the last 20 odd years in. And they were doing this Q&A, and during the course of the chat, he said, well, nobody reports into me.
Well,
I'm the head of the business, but not even my own PA, my personal assistant, she
yeah,
doesn't even report into me. There's no direct lines into me, because we realized at a point in the business that I am not someone who should be managing anything or anyone. So I do what I need to do, but we have a managing director who runs the business, and I bring value where I can bring value, but it is not in being the CEO, the MD, etc. And I thought that kind of blew my little brain back in my 20s. One, because that level of like, what, everybody's not the same, which was kind of
yeah.
news to me when I was in my 20s. Oh, we have different skill sets. Whoa, really? But the other thing was the humility to go, I understand what my role is in the business, and having the business card that says CEO is not my role in this business. And to go, yeah, the best thing I can do is not, I'm here full time, I am working on the business, I'm involved in big decisions, but I manage nothing, because that is not what I should be doing. Which is both, it's a lesson in self-awareness, but also a lesson in humility and leaving the ego at the door, because it's such a cool play, and really paid off for them as well.
I love that story. That reminds me of a gentleman I had on the podcast a few weeks ago, and his name is Matthew. Matthew's incredible. He's worked with a ton of different e-commerce brands, and he's helped some of them go up to over $100 million annual recurring revenue, and or ARR. I always just like spell it out just in case people don't understand what ARR is. But what's really cool about him is I asked him that question. I said, okay, what is the difference between the founders who they started, then they get to a million, they just get stuck, and the founders who can go from startup to $100 million a year? And he goes, well, oh, that's easy, ego. He's like, easy answer. And I went, the fact that you could say that that's an easy answer was mind boggling to me. So he's worked with over 400 different brands. So he's just seen it, right? He's seen it time and time and time again. As he said, the founders who they have so much ego that they have to be in control. They have to do each area of the business. They have to manage everything. Those are the ones who go slow. And he gave me an example of a gentleman that he was working with, that the guy was doing about 100,000 when he started working with him. Then he went from 100,000 to a million in about 10 months. And then after that, he almost 10x every year after that. So he went to a million, then he went to 10 million. It was actually 14. And then from 14 to 36 million. So it's like, that's a huge increase. And he said the reason why is he just got out of the way. And I just thought that was so fascinating. It's like ego and pride actually stops founders from growing, when that's the thing they really want, is to have growth, to make more money, to have more impact, whatever it is. But they don't take a moment to just look in the mirror and say, am I the reason why that I am not actually growing this business?
Yeah, get out of your own way, everybody. Yeah, definitely.
Because that's one of the things, that's a quote. And then I have a question for you. One of the quotes I love is the reason why it's called a bottleneck is because it's at the top. And I remember when I used to work in corporate, I used to be in supply chain logistics. And anytime so I was over a location in East Texas, and anytime it would go really badly, so of course I still had managers I would report to and everything. There's someone who owned that location who was over it, and then I just kind of helped manage it. But anytime it went really bad, I noticed that it was because the person who was owning it, that the fish was basically rotting from the head down. And so if that person wasn't involved, if they weren't able to cast vision, if they weren't able to delegate and move out of the way, it made everyone else's job so much harder. So that was one of the things I picked up pretty early on at 24 years old, was like, okay, I may just be a manager and I'm supposed to be managing you, but guess what? I'm going to delegate some of this stuff to you. And it was crazy that there were so many people in a position that I used to be in, that they were more than willing to take up the extra responsibility, because it fed a need for them, and it helped them grow and evolve. And I believe as humans, to a certain degree, all of us have this need to grow. And I think that's even my question for you, is like, with the e-commerce master plan, doing it one episode every single week for over a decade, what have you seen, not only growth wise in the podcast, because obviously it's grown, but what have you seen growth wise in yourself as you've been doing this for a decade?
Oh, there's two massive questions. I'll do the me one first. So when I had the marketing agency, I got very good at delegation, lots of systems, lots of processes. And there was a time, I think there's that kind of like part where we have to keep relearning things in our careers. You have those moments where you're like, oh shit, I learned that a while ago. I can't believe I just had to relearn that. But that, um, the ability to delegate is critical for success and build systems and all the rest of it. But also, you've got to get the timing right on the delegation. And for me, one of the things I've learned with the podcast and the other stuff I've been doing with this business is sometimes I will leave the delegation too late and begin to resent the task, which is
Mm.
bad. That's not good. So it's making sure that you are kind of delegating ahead of the delegation curve. So you're kind of keeping ahead of that wave so that you're getting things, delegating things over to the team, whether that's, right in the case of the podcast, writing the show notes, following up with the guests to make sure they promote, creating the marketing materials, scheduling the social media, creating the blog, all the stuff that goes into the podcast is get that off your plate at the right time. Because there's a point where it's not the right time to get it off your plate. For some people, that will be day one. For some people, that will be day 100. Depends on where your skill set is in the process. But it's finding ways to be able to successfully delegate that to enable your team to just get on with it so as you're not the bottleneck in it. It's interesting you mentioned bottlenecks. We've spent a lot of the start of this year removing me as bottlenecks from things, or trying to remove me as bottlenecks from things. Haven't got as far with that as I want to, but that's just a time thing. We'll get there. So I think self-growth, probably that, continuing improvements in systeming and delegating. As to the podcast's growth, I think it's been fascinating seeing how the podcast space has changed. There's been like some big seismic shifts in the space. The love of, or the supposed love, due to stats mainly provided by people who want you to watch videos, by which I mean YouTube and the current
Yep.
Spotify push, towards video podcasting. Shouldn't you? But with the kind of alongside that, the big promotional push with video content. Then you've got the stats crash of 2024. God bless Apple. As a marketer, love that change because it meant we were getting more accurate stats. But God, it was depressing seeing the numbers drop so much in such a short space of time. Anyone who's not familiar with that, basically one of those lovely Apple updates that in e-commerce we've all been dealing with because it's screwed up advertising for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
In podcasting, one of those updates meant that the downloads, so Apple Podcasts, the app, if you were subscribed to a show, it would automatically download all the episodes of that show to your phone and count that as a play, which is what we all saw back in our
Well,
podcasting
yep.
systems. They stopped doing that. So it's brilliant because we've now got more accurate stats, but gosh, did it destroy stats, especially if you had a show that had been around for almost 10 years by the time they made the changes. But so that's all been changing. And then I guess in terms of what's happened in our own show is the guest challenge has changed. So the guest challenge has always been big with the e-commerce master plan podcast. Our other podcast, not really a problem. With the e-commerce master plan podcast, it's always been challenging because brands are lovely and marvelous and insightful and wonderful, but they're also
Mm-hmm.
flaky and they're very hard to convince to do podcasts. I think in 2015, I'm obsessed with adding zero, adding numerals. In 2015, we invited between 10 and 20 people for every one we managed to record.
Wow.
It was mad. There's some very creative episode types in the turn of 2015 into 2016, because the two big guest lessons that first year were, wow, it's hard to get people to agree to do a podcast, and secondly, brands don't want to record in November and December, Chloe. Strangely enough, they've got other shit to do. So, but now the guest challenge is more not allowing people onto the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I could fill my show, as I'm sure you could, 10 times over with the people who want to be on it. But the people who want to be on it are not often the people you actually want on the show. a
Yeah.
lot of the time. So we now have many systems to dissuade people from asking to be on the show and to politely tell them no, because we get, I don't know, we probably get between 10 and 20 people asking to be on the show a week who will never be on the show or on either
Well,
show because they're not going to fit. I got a message from someone on LinkedIn today who I know going, "Can I jump the queue just by being nice?" It's like, no, no, you can't, because we've already done your topic this year. We're not going to be doing it until next year, and my brain is not big enough or clever enough to remember the fact you sent me a cheeky LinkedIn DM when I'm in 6 months' time looking for someone to talk about that topic. So that's, I mean, podcasting 10 years in, it continues to throw up interesting challenges and interesting stuff to do and fascinating guests. I'm not
yeah.
sure if that answered your growth
No, it
question.
absolutely answers my question, and it gives me really good insight because I think one of the things that you didn't say it, but you said it a second ago was you trust your systems now, where it's not necessarily where it's like it's all in your head, right? You said you were really nice to me, so I know I have 100 people waiting, but yeah, come on, and I love that because it makes your word mean so much more. Because the thing is it's like no, you have to stay in line. You were the last one to sign up. You're the last one in line. And guess what? We've already done your topic for the year, so you're not gonna be able to be on the show till next year. I don't care how nice you are. You can send me a bottle of wine. You can send me a box of chocolates. Like, here's my address. Here's my PO box. Go for it. And you will still have to do this because this is what everyone goes through. And it just means a lot more. I saw this. It was a good example. There's a gentleman in the United States named Chris Bumstead. He's one of the biggest bodybuilders, won 6 Mr. Olympias in a row. And he talked about this in the beginning. He was dead broke and nobody wanted to sponsor him. And then he said he won his first couple of Olympias, which is one of the biggest events in bodybuilding. And he said, then all of a sudden everyone wanted to sponsor him. And then he said, but I've only ever done sponsorship deals with people that I actually use the product and I like it. And I enjoyed doing business with them. He said that he had to turn down $1 million because he said, I would never do this. He said, I said no pretty early on to $1 million deal when it really could have changed my life. He said, but I told him I'll never use this. This is not anything I want anyone associated with me to use. And he said, so no. And he said, it's made the power of my yes mean so much more. And I think that that's the same for you too, is because you have these systems, you trust your systems, you trust your teams. It doesn't matter how nice you are, unless you are someone that's like, hey, I've been waiting to talk to this person for 20 years. I don't believe there's anyone that's going to be able to just jump the line.
It is an endless challenge because my business now is a media business. We create content to help e-commerce brands and we take money from software companies to fund it all. But throughout, my first responsibility has to be to the audience, not the customer. Which is seems kind of crazy in business, because normally you go, the customer's always right, but our customer is not always right, because if we're not keeping our audience happy, the brands who tune in to visit our websites, read our newsletters, listen to the podcast, come along to the webinars, if we don't keep the content quality up for them, I don't have a business. I also don't have a business if I don't take money off the software companies. But
Yeah.
so your bodybuilding guy makes perfect sense. It's like you could do a very short term deal with someone who just doesn't align with your values and who isn't gonna bring the goods for your audience. But then you don't have X number of months down the line, you've got a worse business because of it. So it's something I'm constantly juggling.
Yeah.
Responsibility to the audience and responsibility to the bank balance.
But I can tell just from talking to you that you're probably doing an excellent job. The fact that you talked about all these different bottlenecks that your team is helping you walk out of, so you're not bottlenecking the business. That speaks a lot to even what we talked about earlier, which is ego, right? So maybe not. I don't know you, but in terms of this way, is maybe you have a big ego, maybe you don't. I mean, but either way, you've been able to work through it in the capacity of being able to just say, you know what, I'm gonna trust my team. You know what? Okay, you guys can handle this. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna take my hands off the wheel here. And yeah, so I believe that you're doing an excellent job.
I'll take that, Stephen.
So how do people connect with you? How do people connect with the podcast? So you mentioned something interesting, but so if I'm an e-commerce brand who's interested in listening to the podcast, where do I find it? And then if I'm a SaaS or if I'm one of these software people, how can I support the podcast, or how can I support you?
Oh, I love it. I would love to break it down that way. So, brands, if you want to hear some of my awesome guests sharing about how they've built their e commerce business, then go and have a look for the e commerce master plan podcast. Simple as that. You'll Google it, you'll find the website. Look on a podcast player, you will find the podcast, and get stuck in. There's well over 500 episodes, so you'll find something you want to listen to. I promise. As to supplier side people who want to get in front of our audience, I run a business called Emetco Media, EMETKO, Emetco Media, and we have a number of different content platforms, all digital, which provide various ways for you to get in front of some similar but different e-commerce audiences. So the easiest way to get in contact with me, whatever your interest, is via LinkedIn. Just look for Chloe Thomas.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. And also, everyone listening, that will be in the show notes. So for some reason you're like, how do I spell Emetco? It's in the show notes. So like, just go look down there. I promise you, it's a link. You don't even have to copy and paste it. It's already linked out. But again, Chloe, thank you so much for joining us. It was incredible. I know that if no one else gets anything, that I got so much from our time together.
My pleasure, Stephen. Great chatting with you.